whites into it and pulled blacks into it. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the entire town council had been murdered and the mayor. And a new council was put in place.
But isn't that what we're seeing now when we see Michigan and Wisconsin, like they're about to go out, and so now they're fixing and adjusting laws and rules on the books on their way out. So yeah, it's the exact same thing.
Precisely. That's right. Exactly.
Changing the game on.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, I mean, think about things like part of the American history that we never talk about. How many familiar with Red Summer? Red Summer of 1919. No? Red Summer was a rash of race riots that took place across the country, where blacks were attacked in their towns and their villages. Towns were wiped off the maps. People were hung. Places were burnt to the ground. All throughout the country, even in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, St. Louis, all across the country there was the attack Tulsa. There was the attack of blacks that extended into the fall, where thousands of black folks were killed, lynched, murdered.
Was it because they were prosperous? Is that the reason for that one?
Well, some of it. Like, I mean, Tulsa was that.
Yeah, that's the one I was trying to. What's the one where was it Tulsa that had a very
It was called the Black Wall Street.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember I've got an article at home. I
That-
remember hearing about it and saving it, but I
That
couldn't
was
remember.
Tulsa. But it,
Black Wall Street was it called?
Yeah.
I remember okay. Was that part of Red Summer?
that was a part of Red Summer. It was a little later, but it was part of Red Summer. What happens is that you have black veterans returning from World War I. And many of them are raising the questions about why they're being treated as second-class citizens.
They served their country.
If they can go off and fight a war, why can't they come home and basically experience the freedoms that are promised? And people thought they were being uppity. But also, you have at the same time, around that era, Birth of a Nation.
Oh yeah.
Birth of a Nation that glorifies the Klan. And it is shown in the Oval Office. And you have 10,000 Klansmen that march down Pennsylvania Avenue in their full Klan regalia. How many of you seen Birth of a Nation?
I know of it.
Both of us too now, though.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I'm talking about the old one. Right?
I know of it. I've seen snippets. Yeah.
They're on their horses and they're
Very heroic.
Oh.
Right? I mean, but that's a part of the ethos of the nation.
Yeah.
And we've never examined that. We don't talk about it. It's just like the stuff that you don't know is not because you don't know it. It's because it's never been exposed to know.
Yeah.
Well,
So how do you have a dialogue about it?
Something that
a perfect example. When my son was in middle school, I took him on a trip to Washington, D.C. And you know, they take them through the government buildings like the White House and whatnot. And they don't tell you on those tours who built that White House
Right.
or who built the Capitol.
No, of course not.
And it was all done with slave labor. Most of those early buildings in Washington, D.C. were all built by
Yeah.
slaves. They never talked about it.
Well, that's the thing Michelle Obama says. Isn't something I wake up every morning
In White House.
in a house that was built by slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was licensed to teach U.S. history, and I had a U.S. history minor in college, and several courses I took were post-Civil War, and of course there was Reconstruction, but there was nothing, no Red Summer, no 1919. None of those incidents were ever discussed. We talked about the German migration to, the Ohio Valley, or the great land rush of the 1800s, and,
Sure.
but we never talked about those issues. I just read, and I didn't get the context and the history of it, but Central Park in Manhattan was a successful, wealthy black community when the land was taken eminent domain to create Central Park. It's, how many, anybody, it's just, that's,
Boggles your mind.
the land was there and it was too valuable for those folks to have it.
I'll give you another prime example. There's a public housing project that is so-called being rebuilt or being rehabbed, but it's removal of the black population out of that public housing. It's called Berry Farm. And Berry Farm actually comes out of the whole Reconstruction era. General Howard was head of the Freedmen's Bureau. And out of that, blacks who were basically living in refugee camps on the parade grounds after the Civil War said, we want to buy land. And so Howard and some monies out of the Freedmen's Bureau bought that land from the Berry family and basically subdivided it and sold it to those blacks who were looking to farm in Washington, on the edge of Washington, D.C. The payment back of that money helps to start Howard University. But almost immediately, there are bills passing in Congress to try to dispossess the folks of the land that was just sold to them. And so it was, so that's what we were trying to remind folks. We got this long history of being dispossessed of this land. And now, of course, the land has gotten so valuable in D.C. that folks didn't bat an eye about dispossessing them this time.
Right. Or Chicago right now, everybody talks about all the violence in Chicago, but just south of the city center, right, where we have our Inglewoods and our Roseland, that's where all the violence is. Well, you got to get the people to leave so you can get the land really cheap, so you get rid of them. That violence that everybody talks about sits in a just one stretch across it, but that's the land that they need. Chicago can't build nothing else north. You go north of the city, everything is jam-packed. They have everything you could possibly want north of the city, but they can't build anymore north of the city. They have to come south. And so they have to push the people away from the land to be able to do it. They have, everybody knows Lakeshore Drive. Well, Lakeshore Drive goes all the way down to like 70th Street, 79th or something like that. But you can't get to it. It's still blocked off because they don't have the land. But when you go by, it's a big gate. And once you go behind the gate, it has fire hydrants. It's got, the streets are there and set up and ready to go. But they can't really build. They can't put, businesses and hotels and stuff there yet because the land yet. They haven't been able to acquire all of the rest of the land yet. It's happening in Detroit. They're doing the same thing in Detroit right now. And so we see it is still happening.
Right.
It just looks different. They use different words, but it's the same thing.
So how do you decide what battle to fight?
All of them.
Oh, yeah.
In what order?
Yeah.
I get overwhelmed with just a little bit that we try to do here. And not overwhelmed, I guess, always busy. There's always something, of course. But there, when you mentioned earlier about all the people that were in that one building, I told Victoria, I thought, that's our intersectionality that you hear so much about now.
How do you manage multiple fronts?
Yeah.
Just do.
Yeah, I think that's the answer. You do it.
Just do.
What do you claim as victories?
All of it.
Praying with a boy in the prison that came up and asked for prayer. That's a victory.
See, I think that one of the things, and I say this to my friend all the time, this is Paris I'm talking about. I say to my friend all the time, I said, we got to redefine what we call victory. Because if we claim victory in the ways that those who are in power claim victory, we never achieve it. But if we redefine the victory as, for example, I know I'm going up against some structure, some maybe big structure. My agenda that day might just be to agitate them. to get on their nerves, to really find ways to make their life hell. We got a senior building right across the street from my church right now. It's called North Capitol at Plymouth. When I arrived at Plymouth in 1992, 1993, there were bulldozers on that lot. And I started making calls, just trying to figure out, because I knew they were building something, but they were building on that lot. And so no matter who I called, nobody would tell me. I called permitting department, nobody would tell me. I called zoning, nobody would tell me. I called the city council with Charlene Drew Jarvis then. Nobody could tell me.
Jeez, and that should be a matter of public record.
So I went down the street where some guys always bummed money from me. And I knew they were using it to drink. And I said, look guys, I said, I'm gonna buy you today a fifth of whatever you want. I said, but you're gonna do something first. They went, what? I said, you're gonna take these 2 baseball bats and you're gonna stand behind me and look like you're crazy.
And they might actually be.
And so I walked up and got in front of the bulldozer and said, I'm not moving. I said, I'm standing between you and them. Because if I step out of the way, they're gonna bust your head. I said, you need to find and get on the phone whoever owns this property, and we need to have a conversation. So I had no idea. Turned out to be the Exxon Corporation.
Oh, man.
Right? So the Exxon Corporation had paid $1 million for that property in '93. They wanted to build a gas station. And of course they wanted to keep it out of the public. That's why I couldn't find out. So it began to sort of, it began to click. So they said to me, we had a conversation, and they were in Texas, so I was talking to the headquarters in Texas. And so they said to me, they said, well, we can't allow you to be threatening people. And I said, well, let me put it this way. I have no control over who threatens people. I'm the one that's standing between you and your folks getting their ass whipped. And they said, what can we do? I said, you need to come up here and have a community meeting and tell this community what you're doing on this site. And so they came. They came, they wanted to put on a dog and pony show. We had put out in the community leaflets that just simply said, did you know? Did you know Exxon was going to build here? Did you know? We had a full house at that meeting. Exxon was there and was very adamant about what they were going to do, and they were claiming they had a matter of right, they could do it. The city councilor showed up and basically did one of these condescending little talks like, you people really don't understand, and people began to ball up their agenda and throw it at her. So I had to step up front and sort of say, stop, don't do that. I mean, so it was really interesting. And the thing that turned the tide that night was there was this lady, and I don't even know who she is to this day, who had come to the community meeting on a walker. And she was probably in maybe late 70s, early 80s, I'd imagine. And so she was the last speaker. She raised her hand. I recognized her. She came down the aisle of the church to the microphone with this walker. Right? So every eye is on her as she's coming down the aisle. And she opens her mouth, and she's very southern, later, whatever that word is, talk. She sort of says, she says, I'm just a little old lady, and you're the Exxon Corporation, so I think you got all the money in the world and you can do whatever you want to do, I imagine. She says, I'm a little old lady, I don't have long for this world. She said, but I still know how to strike matches.
All right.
Whoa. And the whole room blew up, right? Exxon, the folks from Exxon got bright red in the face, right? And I just held up my hands like that, right? Because she had just done it for me, right? And so Exxon warehoused that property for 10 years.
Wow.
And the first phase of trying to get it was that they gave clergy money to call me and put pressure on me to back away from my objection.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right? And so that was coming in. So colleagues from the United Church of Christ were calling me. Neighborhood pastors were calling me. People were saying things like, well, you know, that's Exxon, you can't possibly win. Why don't you get something out of it and call it a deal? And I said, well, the issue is that this community made a decision. And I gotta abide by the decision that this community made. And so they kept doing those probes for 10 years. The final straw was this, and it was interesting because, you know, I get a call from somebody who claims to be representing a company that wants to buy the lot from Exxon, and they want to come and see me. And I'm saying to them over the phone, why are you calling me? Why don't you call Exxon? I don't have purchase and sale on that property or anything. You need to call Exxon and have the conversation. No, we called Exxon. Exxon said we needed to see you. I said, well, I have no idea why Exxon said that you needed to see me because I have no legal grounds on that property. So they came to see me. So it was one black guy and two white guys. And you'll know why I say this in a moment. And so the black guy immediately hits my office and he just starts talking nonstop. Right? And he's talking about the company that they wanted to build over there and da-da-da-da, and he's talking nonstop. So really, literally 20 minutes into the conversation, I said, stop. Who are you two? And the comment out of one of the guys is, didn't even tell me his name, he says, he speaks for us. And this guy continues to start speaking, which I thought was peculiar. And so I finally say to him at the end of the meeting, I said, look, it was the community that stopped Exxon from building here. And if you want to purchase this property, you need to come before the community and tell the community about what you want to do. And I said, and I will abide by whatever the community decides that they want to do. I said, but first, I need these things. I need to see your articles of incorporation. I need to see where your money's coming from. I need to see your lines of credit. I said, once you communicate that to me and I figure out that you are actually bona fide and serious, then I will call a community meeting and you can present your case before them. So the guy got up and shook my hand, and then he said to me, he says, thank you for your time. You'll get the stuff from me top of the week next week. And this is for your troubles. And they hand me a big envelope.
Oh,
Nice.
no. Oh, no.
So I look in the envelope, and the envelope was filled with $100 bills.
Yeah. Grease and foams.
Wow.
And at that point, and I misread the situation. I gotta admit, I misread it. Because I felt, just like you said, grease and palms, I felt angry that they had done this, and I thrust it back at them, and I said, I told you what I needed. Right? I told you what I need from you to get a community meeting. I said, I need to see those articles of incorporation. I need to see who your backers are, who the principals are. I said, that's how you get it. And so at that point, they left the meeting. I'm going to the hospital. I stop at a traffic light. And I'm next to a cop car, and it dawns on me that those were two cops.
And had you taken that money?
To witness me taking the money.
They were trying to set you up.
Wow.
Because literally 48 hours later, I got a certified registered return letter from Exxon asking me offering me first right of refusal on the land. So it was an attempt to remove me.
Wow. What's your feelings for the future, especially with the Democratic House? Is it going to make any difference at all?
Well, they're going to be engaged in a model of agitation that they are not engaged in right now because they have no power. And it's the thing that is important is that there is some checks and balances that are put in place. That's necessary and it's important. And because right now they've given this guy a carte blanche to do anything he wants and to cover. So you need to have those checks and balances in place. And the reason we're dealing with this right now and dealing with him, I told this story shortly, right after the election. I said, because people were reeling, as you know, people were reeling, people were in shock. I said, let me tell you what happened. And I told him a strange story. I said, when I graduated seminary in Chicago, there was a woman, a class behind me, who considered herself liberal or progressive, or how she chose to define it. She knocked on my apartment door and she says, I'm thinking about renting your apartment next year. Can I see it? And I said, sure. And so I let her in. She walked around my apartment. And she stood at the door a minute on her way out and she says, yeah, I think I will rent it. Because after all, I can fumigate it, right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
After 8 years of Obama, you could sell the fumigation of the nation. Because the unaddressed racism and white supremacy that we have not dissected is still present. And it's even present from folks who say, I'm not racist, and particularly present among that crew that says I'm not racist.
It's actually stronger. It's not the same, it's stronger.
It's the Guess Who's Coming to Dinner,
Mhm.
the first one with Spencer Tracy, and you know, they're these great
Right.
people until their daughter came home with a black man, then they had to start checking themselves. Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't think I was until it was put in their face. And so, yeah.
Excuse me, Jay, what do you mean by it's stronger?
It's stronger because the base was riled up. And Trump won. In 30 years of organizing that base, 40 years of organizing that base paid off. And now they're establishing a very, very strong judgeship and other infrastructures in place to last for years and years and years. And it's going to be very difficult to dislodge it
Sure.
easily.
One of the problems that have become, though, is that we've gotten so conditioned to talking in right and left language.
Yes.
We've gotten very conditioned in talking about conservative or liberal language. All of those other types of things that we've gotten sort of very conditioned. And so, as a consequence, we failed to see the lasting phenomenon that exists in the country. For example, Ronald Reagan goes down to Philadelphia, Mississippi
Starts his campaign.
to announce his candidacy.
Yes, he does.
Why are you in Philadelphia, Mississippi?
Yes, sir.
There is no major media market in Philadelphia,
Yes,
Mississippi.
sir. It's the Democrats.
You got to work to get to Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Yeah.
You're down there because that's where the civil rights workers were killed.
Yep.
And so you are flashing that message to all of the white supremacist groups that exist and sympathizers. One of the things that Reagan did do, though, is not exactly embrace fully those groups. Right? This person has fully and completely embraced those groups, and has embraced Zionism in its most rabid forms.
Yeah.
Right? So this is one of the few times that actually white supremacists and Zionists can get in the same bed together. Right?
Remember that Richard Spencer dude? He went down, the white supremacist guy?